Robertson.
Speaker, well, isn't it interesting, in the two contributions that we've had from the government speakers so far, they've devoted a grand total of around 30 seconds to part one of this bill around child support. And there is a reason for that, Mr. Speaker, because what we discover when we look at the regulatory impact statement and we cast our mind back to the Child Support Amendment Act of 2013 is that part one of this bill is about trying to clean up one of the biggest messes that we have seen in the administration of government in many years. We're talking here about a patch-up job to make sure that there's only additional expenditure of $163 million. That's how bad it's got. That this is actually an improvement on the situation when an additional $163 million has to be shelled out. Part one of this bill relates to measures around the changing of collection of child support that were supposed to be implemented firstly by the 1st of April 2013, then by the 1st of April 2014, that are now being implemented already today for the 1st of April 2015, and this legislation won't have passed, so it'll be retrospective legislation on legislation that was meant to have been passed 2 years ago. This is incompetence, Mr. Speaker. This is incompetence that is costing New Zealanders hundreds of millions of dollars, and it lies at the feet of this government and of the Revenue Ministers, Mr. Dunn and now Mr. McLeod. And don't think that this will stop at $163 million, because what lies at the heart of the problem here is a capital project, an IT project at IRD that is out of control. No one on that side of the House over the last 3 or 4 years has had the hand on the wheel of this project, and it has spiralled and spiralled out of control. We're talking about $1 billion IT system upgrade that IRD claim they need, and the costs just keep on increasing. It's going to make Nova Pay and the stuff-ups around Nova Pay look like a rounding error in David Bennett's checkbook reconciliation. This is the biggest stuff-up that this government has overseen, and more details of it will come out, Mr. Speaker. What we learn when we look at the regulatory impact statement for this is that the original cost of implementing these child support reforms was $30 million. A big price tag. There were people in IRD at the time who balked at that cost. But what's interesting is that as the business case was developed, the costs escalated up to $120 million, a huge level of expenditure. And as those costs escalated, one of the reasons they did, and this is from the regulatory impact statement, one of the main assumptions in the business case was that the vast majority of expenditure would be operating costs. So that means at the get-go, the government didn't even realise that fundamentally changing the way they collect child support might have some IT impacts. It might actually mean that the old clunky IRD system wasn't going to cope. And so it escalates from 30 million to 120 million. And then, as 2013 and 2014 go on, as small changes are made to the bill, the cost escalates out to $210 million of extra expenditure. We're raising questions in the House every day about how Bill English is going to scrape through to a surplus. Well, he's got big problems coming down the line here. Here's another $163 million. So it goes out to $210 million. And Todd McLeod comes in on his white horse to save the day by choosing an option which delays part of the child support reforms. So it's actually not like we're saving the money, they're just not implementing part of the reforms. So actually it still costs $210 million. It's just that today we're approving only spending $163 million of it. This is a shambles, Mr. Speaker, and Peter Dunn and Todd McLeod have to answer some questions about where was the oversight. Did the National Party learn nothing from Nova Pay? Did they learn nothing from INSIS? What we have seen here is poor, incompetent management of taxpayer money. And every head on that side of the House should be down, because this falls at the feet of the National Party. The people who tell us that they're great managers of the economy, the people who shout and scream across at parties on the other side who they think have ideas for expenditure that might cost a bit of money. Well, look after the $163 million. We're not taking it from the National Party anymore. This is straight out incompetence, Mr. Speaker. And so when we actually go through to look at what was said at the time that the bill was passed, I do want to give credit to the Labour Party members for when the Child Support Amendment Bill went through in late 2012, actually raised with the government the issues with the implementation of the system. What was said in the minority report was, from the Labour members, we continue to have concerns about the adequacy of the computer system at Inland Revenue. The Prime Minister's admitted that the system is not up to this. It goes on to talk about the fact that while IRD have suggested that there will be implementation issues, that they think that they can deliver this. They couldn't. It didn't work. And no one on that side of the House was keeping watch over the expenditure of taxpayer money. So what we find ourselves now, Mr. Speaker, is with a bill that's in front of the House here to try to clean up this mess. And we're going to have government speaker after government speaker talk about anything else other than that. And yes, there are some other measures in this bill that are worthy of consideration and that we must look at. The issue around the IRD, around research and development, I'm sure other colleagues will talk about more in detail. But we have had calls consistently from the business community for a simple solution on how to encourage and support research and development, how to make sure that those companies at the beginning of their lives can invest, but not just there, onward through a company's life, that they can continually make investment. Companies want certainty, they want simplicity. That's why the Labour Party has consistently proposed a 15% R&D tax credit. What we've got in front of us here is a complex system that will benefit a small number of companies, which nobody is completely clear yet about how will really operate. This was an opportunity for the government to actually adopt a clear and consistent policy. They're worried about the fact that business wants something like the R&D tax credit, but what's been proposed here is a fraction of that in a more complicated way, and we'll obviously want to ask questions about that when it comes back before the House. We recognise on this side of the House that the best kind of tax system is one that is fair, one that is simple, and one that is consistently applied, and where there is avoidance that is followed up. There is a failure in this bill on two significant counts on those core principles of a tax system. The first of those is the failure to come up with a decent idea on R&D, and the second of those is a child support system that is completely out of control. And Mr. Speaker, I might say that electorate MPs, I imagine from all sides of the House, and perhaps some list MPs as well, will have been starting to get people coming into their offices in recent days as the first letters about this new system are going out. And there's confusion. There is complete confusion going on. There are so many issues here, Mr. Speaker, that we believe the government hasn't thought through properly. When the Child Support Amendment Bill, which has been amended through this Act, went through, minority reports were issued by the Labour Party, the Green Party and New Zealand First. All of us raised concerns about adequacy of payment, about the implications, particularly for women, for the changed apportionment of care costs. The 28% shared care threshold in the legislation is low. It's going to provide a significant concern for a number of parents, and they're the ones showing up in offices now saying, how is this fair? And yet here we are in March 2015 with finally the legislation in front of us for that very thing. It's been implemented in law, Mr. Speaker. People are getting letters telling them that they've got to make these payments, and the IRD's not even ready for it. The IRD doesn't even have a system to manage it today. How could this be any more incompetently managed? Mr. Speaker, we will support this bill through the Select Committee because we have to sort this mess out. But mark my words, Mr. Speaker, the cost to the taxpayer of this stuff-up, of this failure of management by the national government will be hundreds of millions of dollars, and this government must take ownership for their incompetence.